They teach you that the universe is made of laws. Gravity, thermodynamics, causality. They are wrong. The universe has only one law, and it is written in the silence between a trigger's pull and the impact that follows. All the rest, civilization, morality, hope, is just a story we tell ourselves in the dark to keep the truth at bay. The war did not teach me this. The war only gave me the eyes to see what was always there. The knife was a piece of that truth. I drew the monomolecular edge across the scavenged alloy, and the metal sang a single note in the quiet of the barracks. The litany of the scythe, a name I never spoke. The ritual was for me alone. With each pass of the blade, a name. Reed. He looked left when the threat was right. A failure of attention. Meyer, his rifle jammed. A failure of maintenance. Evans. He hesitated. A failure of will. Each name was a lesson etched into the steel, a ghost absorbed. They were not memories. They were data. Their weakness was now my strength. In the bunk across from me, Leo Pike watched, his body still, his eyes tracking the movement of the blade. He did not speak. He understood the ritual not as a memorial, but as the sharpening of a tool. The hatch to the barracks opened, spilling the weak, utilitarian light of the corridor across the floor. Sergeant Barrett Stryker stood in the doorway. His posture was too straight, a man trying to use discipline as a spine. He looked worn, his uniform clean but frayed at the cuffs. 6 years of this place had scraped him down to the bone, but he refused to admit it. "Reaper, Pike," he said. His voice was the formal bark of a man pretending he still had a command to lead. "Briefing room." He left. I finished the final pass on the blade, the edge so fine it seemed to disappear into the gloom. I slid it back into its sheath. The quiet click was the only answer I gave. The briefing room was the heart of the nail, our little tomb hammered into the iron-rich rock of Sector 9. A long table dominated the space, its surface scarred with the history of our abandonment. Stryker stood at its head, hands clasped behind his back. Jax and Miller, 2 other survivors from the original company, stood near the door. Miller shifted his weight from foot to foot, the motion of a man who wanted to be anywhere else. Jax was just a big, slow slab of muscle, useful for carrying heavy things. "The primary water reclamation unit is dead," Stryker began. "Catastrophic failure in the centrifuge. Dr. Weiss says it's irreparable. We have 72 hours of potable water in the reserve tank. After that, we drink runoff, and we know what that does." He let the silence hang in the room. We all remembered the dysentery that took 4 men the 2nd year. "There is one option," Stryker continued, his eyes fixed on a map projection above the table. A small, distant outpost was circled. "Survey Post Gamma. Their manifest listed a spare cryogenic condenser, identical model to ours. If we can retrieve it, Weiss believes he can rig it to our system." I studied the map. Gamma was a 12-hour march across the Terminus Belt, through the Razorback Peaks. It had gone silent 3 years ago, another acceptable rounding error on the authorities' great balance sheet. "Zane, you have point," Stryker said, looking at me. "Pike will run scout. Jackson Miller, you're on security and transport. You carry the condenser back. It's our only priority." He looked at each of us. "You are soldiers of the expeditionary force. You will follow protocol. No unnecessary risks. Bring that equipment home. Dismissed." His words were whined through a canyon. They made noise but changed nothing. Jackson Miller gave him a ragged "Yes, Sergeant," and went to draw their gear. Pike just nodded once and followed me out. We prepared in silence. I checked the charge on my pulse rifle, the weight of each magazine marking out how many choices I had left. Pike handled his kit in silence, doing exactly what I did. He was the only one left who understood. You don't fight the void with speeches. You fight it with a full magazine and a sharp piece of steel. Outside the nail, the perpetual twilight of this world greeted us. A constant wind mourned through mountains that bled rust-colored streaks down their sides. We moved out, a 4-man line into the gloom. The ground was treacherous, littered with loose shale and the tough, leathery roots of the native flora. For 6 years, this had been my world. Dropped on the edge of Sector 9 to hold a line that no one remembered drawing. The first winter, the spire connection to the core systems had failed. The comms went dead. The supply drops stopped. Command forgot us. We were a line item in a budget, deleted. Stryker still held to the fantasy that it was a technical error, that one day the ships would return. He was a historian, a man who believed in the logic of the past. He couldn't accept that history had simply discarded him. I knew the truth. This wasn't a mistake. It was a gift. It had stripped away the lies and left only the hunt. We were 5 hours out when Pike stopped. He held up a fist and the rest of us froze. He knelt, his fingers hovering over the damp soil. Track. 2 of them, heavy, one bleeds. I moved up to him, my rifle ready. The massive 4-toed print of a conjoined brute host, and beside it the mark of its cerebral rider. Dark, viscous fluid stained the rock inside one of the prints. I looked in the direction they were headed, away from the peaks, away from our path to Gamma. "They're wounded," I said, "headed for cover." "We stick to the mission, Reaper." Stryker's voice came over the comms in my ear. He was monitoring from the base. "The condenser is the objective." "A wounded animal leads you to its den, Sergeant," I replied. I clicked the comm off before he could answer. I looked at Pike. "We follow." Pike nodded, a feral grin touching his lips for a bare instant. He was already moving. Miller and Jax exchanged a nervous glance but fell in behind me. My word was law out here. Stryker's rank was a memory. My skill was a present tense reality. The tracks led us down from the high ground into a network of damp, narrow ravines. After another click, Pike held up his hand again. He pointed. Ahead, a waterfall of rust-colored water cascaded over a rock face, obscuring the entrance to a hidden cleft in the mountain. The tracks led straight into it. We moved through the waterfall, the iron-heavy water soaking us instantly. The space behind it was a small, humid ravine, no more than 50 yards across, and it was full. At first I thought they were rock formations, strange, crystalline growths jutting from the dark soil in rows. They were a pale, translucent white, each the size of a man's torso. Then I saw one of them shift, a slow, organic contraction. They were not rock. I walked forward, my rifle at my shoulder, my boots sinking into the fertile ground. At the base of each shape, I saw a relic, a battered combat helmet, a scorched gauntlet, its fingers curled into a claw. A single boot, the foot still in it, sticking out of the soil like a grim marker. Pike let out a low hiss beside me. I raised my rifle, activating the light source on its barrel. The beam cut through the gloom and struck one of the casings. The horror of it resolved with perfect clinical clarity. Suspended inside, floating in a thick amber fluid, was a cerebral rider, its limbs folded, its multi-lensed eyes closed in gestation. It was tethered to the bottom of the casing by a network of dark, vein-like tubules, and those tubules did not stop there. They ran down, through the casing and into the earth, a black umbilical cord connecting the gestating enemy to the decomposing human corpse planted beneath it. The spinal column and bone marrow, I realized, were the primary fuel source. They were not just burying our dead, they were planting them. It was a garden, and we were the crop. The march back to the nail was silent. We did not have the condenser from Gamma. We had something heavier. Miller stumbled twice, his face the color of clay. Jack stared straight ahead, his knuckles white where he gripped his rifle. They were wrestling with a new kind of fear, a terror that went beyond the simple finality of death. They were grappling with the horror of purpose. Their deaths would not be an end, but a beginning. Pike moved at my side, his senses still sharp, but his usual predatory ease was gone. He was watching me, looking for a sign, for the way to process this new information. I gave him nothing. Inside my mind, the gears were turning. The garden was a tactical reality, a vulnerability, a high-value target. My disgust was not moral but professional. It was inefficient to let a rival use your resources. We entered the command center caked in mud and rust-colored water. Stryker was waiting, his face tight with impatience. Dr. Orson Weiss was with him, a lean shadow smelling of antiseptic. "Report," Stryker snapped. "Did you secure the condenser?" "No," I said. "The objective changed. The conjoined are not just fighting for territory. They're fighting for resources." I explained what we found. My report was a sequence of facts: the location, the number of casings, the method of gestation. I used words like nutrient source and incubation medium. I did not speak of helmets or boots. I did not use the names of the dead whose faces I'd imagined beneath the soil. Miller began to retch in the corner. Jax simply leaned against the wall, his head bowed. Stryker's face went through a rapid series of changes: disbelief, confusion, then a deep, soul-shaking revulsion. He looked like a man who had just been told the laws of physics had been repealed. Weiss was different. He leaned forward, his eyes bright with a terrible intellectual hunger. "The tubules, they connect directly to the corpse? At the spinal column?" "Yes," I said. "Fascinating," he whispered. "A biological siphon. I need samples, soil, casing fragments, tissue if you can get it." Stryker finally found his voice. "This is a desecration," he said, the words strangled. We have a duty." That duty became our new calculus. The condenser was forgotten. The new priority was body recovery. We mounted 2 missions in the following week. They were brutal, close-run things. The conjoined fought differently now. They seemed to know. Their tactics were smarter, designed to separate us, to drag the wounded away from the pack. They were not just killing, they were harvesting. During the second recovery mission, the universe shrank to the size of a rockfall. Private Cortez was down, his leg torn open by shrapnel from a conjoined enzyme spitter. He was 30 yards away, pinned in the open. Logan and I moved to give him cover. That was when the pair that hit him broke from behind a monolithic slab of iron-streaked stone. The sight of them was a familiar problem. The brute host was a 3-meter wall of raw power, a fusion of thick, dark keratin plates and exposed, twitching muscle, built for smashing fortifications. It moved on 4 limbs, its claws gouging deep grooves in the rock. Fused to its back, woven directly into its spine, was the cerebral rider. It was a slender, almost delicate thing, its long limbs ending in fine, sharp digits. Its head, with its cluster of multi-lensed eyes, swiveled, processing the battlefield with cold efficiency. The host was the body. The rider was the mind. One being, 2 forms. The rider's eyes fixed on us. It directed the host not with a sound, but with the speed of thought. The massive creature charged at a rock shelf above Cortez, shattering it with 2 blows. The rockfall wasn't meant to kill him. It was meant to hem him in, to make recovery a meat grinder. "Logan, suppress the rider," I ordered. "I'll draw the host." I fired a 3-round burst at the host's head. The pulse round sparked and ricocheted off its thick skull plate, doing nothing but getting its attention. It turned towards me, its immense form eclipsing the twilight. It was exactly what I wanted, but the rider was smarter than the beast it rode. While the host charged me, forcing me back behind cover, the rider extended one of its long forelimbs. A gland swelled, and it spat a thick, greenish glob of acid that sizzled through the air and struck the rock face near Logan. He cried out as the spray splashed back, melting the composite plate on his gauntlet like hot wax. They were a perfect, combined arms team. As the host lunged, I dropped low and fired into the softer tissue of its leg joint. It roared and faltered for a second. In that moment, its turn exposed the thick chitin of its shoulder, and on it, I saw the glyph. It was not the first scar I had seen. The pair we tracked to the marrow garden had borne an ancient-looking mark, a simple spiral. This one was different. It was new, the edges of the incision still sharp against the dark plate. It was a complex diagram of a circle with two lines converging on it from the outside. Inside the circle was a single sharp diagonal slash. My mind processed it not as art, but as data. The circle was the enclosed ravine of the Marrow Garden. The converging lines were our angle of attack. The slash was death. It was a schematic of our last victory over them. It was not a memorial. It was an after-action report carved into flesh. The lesson was learned. This new pair wasn't using cover to hide. It was using it to channel us into a kill zone. Logan advanced too far, blind to the setup. Another conjoined pair, silent until now, emerged from the rocks on his flank. He was caught between them. The second host closed in and crushed him with a single, brutal stomp. There was no chance to intervene. Cortez was dead. Logan was dead. I threw an incendiary grenade that landed near Cortez's body. The thermite ignited with a blinding white flare, a promise of desecration denied. I fell back. The image of the Kinscar burned into my mind. They were adapting. Every time we killed them, we were teaching them how to kill us better. 2 men lost for 1 scorched body we didn't even recover. The math was not in our favor. That night, the command center was a pressure cooker. "We have to end this," Stryker said, his fist hitting the table. The sound was flat in the dense air. "We will mount a full assault. We will burn that entire ravine to the ground." "A direct assault is a waste of men," I stated. I was not arguing with him. I was correcting a tactical error. "They know we're coming. That Kinscar proves it. They'll be waiting. You'll spend half the garrison to take a piece of ground they can find again somewhere else." "It's a moral imperative," Stryker shot back, his face flushed. "Morality is a luxury we don't have, Sergeant. All we have is math. And the math says your plan is suicide." "There may be another way." A quiet voice cut in. Dr. Weiss stood in the doorway of his med bay, holding a data slate. His eyes were wide, sleepless, but burned with a zealot's fire. "The problem is not the garden. The problem is the resource. If we can deny them that..." He gestured for us to enter his sanctuary. On his main screen was a magnified image of a tissue sample, a tangled mess of organic fibers. "They inject an enzyme post-mortem," Weiss explained. "It's a remarkable agent. It doesn't just decompose the body, it targets and liquefies bone marrow, specifically the hematopoietic stem cells. It turns the spinal column into a biological wick, drawing the refined nutrients up to the gestating rider." He paused, looking at us. "They are not eating the body. They are drinking the soul. It's horribly, perfectly efficient." He swiped the screen, showing a simulation. A body being injected, the slow, methodical process of its internal dissolution. "So, how do we stop it?" Stryker asked. "The enzyme is delicate," Weiss said. "It's nullified by extreme heat. Catastrophic thermal damage to the torso and spinal column would render the corpse inert. Useless to them." Stryker stared at the screen, at the animated depiction of what Weiss was suggesting. His face was pale, his jaw working. He, the historian, the man who believed in dignified ends and honorable sacrifice, was being confronted by a final, obscene necessity. He turned to me, his eyes empty. In them, I saw the last vestiges of his faith crumbling to dust. "Give the order, Reaper," he said, his voice cracking. It wasn't a command. It was a plea for me to carry the weight of it. I did not have to. He gathered himself, his training a final bulwark against the abyss. He keyed the general comms for the base. "Attention all personnel. New standing order, effective immediately. All Expeditionary Force personnel killed in action are to be sanitized. Incendiary ordnance is authorized and mandatory. No body will be left for the enemy. No body will be left behind." He cut the transmission. The dam had broken. From now on, our duty to our fallen was not to bury them, but to erase them. Months passed. The scorching of the dead became a thing of grim routine. It was a sacrament of failure, a final foul duty that hollowed out the men. After a firefight, we would perform the act. The thermite grenade would burn with a light so white it felt like it was scouring your soul. The smell, a sickening fusion of burnt meat and melted composite armor, would cling to the air for hours. I watched the others. I saw Jax, who had once been able to carry a wounded man 2 clicks, now struggled to even look at the bodies. I saw the tremor in Miller's hands become a permanent condition. They were ghosts haunting the shells of soldiers. To me, it was just another part of the process, a necessary step in resource denial. The war had a new, ugly equation, but it was still just a set of variables. The end of the old world came not with a bang, but with a shudder. I was in the mess hall, watching Pike meticulously clean his rifle, when the lights strobed twice, and died. A deep groan travelled through the deck plates of the Nail, the sound of a vast machine having a seizure. The main power generator had given its last breath. Life support was on its last battery backup. The Nail was no longer a fortress, it was a coffin. Stryker's voice over the emergency comms was frayed, the authoritative bark worn down to a desperate rasp. He called a meeting. All section leaders. The generator is gone. We have 12 hours of battery for life support. After that, the air scrubbers fail. He pointed a finger at the main schematic of the base. But there is a chance. The lowest levels, the structural vaults were sealed by a cave-in during the first year's assault. The base inventory shows they stored primary power conduits down there. If we can get to them, if we can find one that's intact, Weiss thinks we can bypass the generator and hardline the backup reactor directly to life support. Jax, you'll run the breaching charges. Vance, you're on tech. You'll assess the conduits. Reaper, you have security. Keep them alive. He looked around the room, trying to project a confidence he did not feel. We are going to restore the light. I saw right through the words. He was just a man trying to postpone the darkness. The lower levels were a different world. Our headlamps cut sharp, lonely cones through an absolute blackness. The groans of the base's dying structure were louder here, a constant reminder that tons of rock and metal hung above our heads. Vance, a small, wiry man whose only real weapon was a data slate, moved with a nervous energy. Jax was a silent ox, carrying the shaped charges on his back. I moved between them, my senses tuned to the dark, listening for the scuttling sounds of anything other than us. We reached the collapse. A solid wall of twisted girders and shattered ferrocrete blocked the corridor. Jax set the charges, and we retreated. The blast was a dull, muffled whomp that sent a tremor through the floor. Dust rained down. When it cleared, there was a new hole into the darkness beyond. Behind the rubble was not a storage bay. It was a corridor we never knew existed, and at its end, a door. The door was different from anything else in the Nail. It was a seamless slab of tungsten, untouched by the rust and decay that had claimed the rest of the base. There was no keypad, no handle, just a single symbol etched into its center. A perfect circle with a clean, vertical line running through it. The insignia of the authority's Special Projects Division. "What is this?" Vance whispered, his light tracing the symbol. "Open it!" Stryker's voice crackled in my comms. He was watching through my helmet feed. Vance knelt, connecting his data slate to a small, nearly invisible port at the door's edge. A heavy thud came from within the door. A seam of light appeared as the tungsten slab slid sideways into the wall. The chamber beyond was small. The air that washed over us was dry and had not been breathed in 6 years. There was no dust. In the center of the room, on a single black pedestal, sat an onyx-black data slate. Stryker, Weiss, and a few others met us in the vault. Vance took the slate and plugged it into a portable monitor. He worked, bypassing layers of military-grade encryption. Finally, the screen came to life. There were no frantic logs, no last messages. It was a corporate presentation. The title was displayed in sans serif font. Project Sentinel Bait, Sector 9 Pacification Assessment. Vance scrolled down. We saw charts, graphs, tables of resource allocation and risk modeling. We saw our own unit designation, Bait Group 7. The slate's purpose was unambiguous. We had been sent here intentionally, deployed to this world of known high-level hostiles to absorb their attention, to make them bleed their resources on us. We were a distraction, a calculated sacrifice to allow a different, more valuable authority operation to proceed unmolested in a neighboring system. The final slide was titled Conclusion Strategy. It contained 3 words: Implement Ghost Protocol. It was not a contingency. It was the planned final step. Our abandonment was not a tragedy. It was a line item. The room fell silent. I saw Stryker's face drain of color, his faith and his history and his entire identity collapsing inward like a dying star. I saw Weiss stare at the screen with a look of intellectual fury, another obscene data point for his ledger. I felt nothing. No shock, no betrayal, only a profound and perverse sense of vindication. I had always believed the reasons for the fight were a lie. I had always known that only the act of the fight was real. I had been right. The authority had not betrayed us. They had given us a gift. They had freed us from the illusion of purpose, from the lie of civilization. They had left us with only the beautiful, simple, honest truth of the harvest. All that was left was the void, and in the void, there is clarity. Stryker stared at the screen, at the words, Implement Ghost Protocol, and a sound escaped his throat, a dry, rasping choke. He was a man watching his own ghost being signed into existence 6 years in the past. No, he whispered. He straightened up, drawing on the last reserves of a discipline that no longer had a foundation. This is a fabrication, a lie. His voice grew louder, more frantic. Enemy psychological warfare, designed to break our morale. A sophisticated deception. He turned to Vance. Wipe it. Erase this poison from our systems. That's an order. Vance just looked at him, his face slack with shock. He didn't move. The order was an absurdity, a child screaming at the tide. I took the data slate from the portable monitor. Stryker's eyes locked onto mine. Reaper, I am giving you an order. Destroy that slate. The truth is not a choice, Sergeant. I tucked the slate into my webbing. It's just a condition. The news did not spread. It detonated. Back in the dying, red-lit corridors of the Nail, the information passed from man to man, a virus that killed hope on contact. The rigid structure of the squad, the chain of command that Stryker had so desperately tried to maintain, dissolved into its constituent parts, terrified, betrayed men. The collapse was quiet. I stood in the main corridor, watching. Miller was the first. He sat on his bunk for 10 minutes, staring at nothing. Then he stood up, stripped off his body armor, placed his rifle neatly on his cot, and walked to the main airlock. He did not say a word to anyone. No one tried to stop him. We all heard the outer door cycle open, then shut. He was gone. A moment later, 2 more followed his example. They didn't run screaming into the twilight. They just walked away from a fight whose meaning had been retroactively stolen. It was a form of suicide that felt more like a resignation. Stryker tried to stop the bleeding. He gathered what men he could in the mess hall. He stood on a table, his face a haggard ruin in the emergency lighting, and he preached the old faith. He spoke of duty, of honor, of the flag of the authority. The words, once a source of strength, were now just noise. They were the babbling of a mad priest in a desecrated temple. The men stared at him with dead eyes. I let him finish. When his voice finally trailed off into a ragged silence, I approached. There were maybe 20 men left who were still functional. The rest were either gone or had retreated into a catatonic despair, the living dead. I held up the data slate. He offers you a comfortable lie, I said, my voice cutting through the gloom. It wasn't loud, but it commanded the space. I offer you a hard truth. We were never soldiers. We were bait. We were sent here to die. I let the words settle. I saw the last flash of denial die in their eyes. They took everything from us, I continued. Our homes, our pasts, our futures. They left us in the dark and declared us ghosts. They thought that would be our end. They were wrong. They gave us a gift. I looked from face to face. Pike's eyes were locked on mine, glowing with a primal understanding. They freed us, I said. They severed the last chain that tied us to their world of lies. They stripped away everything but the fight itself. There is no rescue coming. There is no home to return to. There is no meaning in the past. All of that is ash. All that is left is the harvest. Look around you. Look at the man next to you. That is your nation. The ground beneath your feet, that is your home. The enemy at the gate is the only law. We will fight, not for a flag that was never ours, but for the purity of the act. We will fight because it is the only honest thing left in the universe. We will make them regret the day they made us. I stopped. The silence that followed was different. It was not the silence of despair. It was the silence of appraisal, of acceptance. Leo Pike stood at my side. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. It was a declaration. A few others followed, moving to stand behind me, their expressions grim, their shoulders squared. They were a smaller pack, but a harder one. Stryker slid off the table. He stared at me, defeated. He turned and shuffled away toward his command center. A king with no subjects, a shepherd with no flock. Later, I found Weiss in his medbay. He wasn't tending to the broken men. He was working, his movements precise and furious. Vials of conjoined enzymes were arrayed on his workbench. He was running simulations on his main console. He looked up as I entered, his eyes burning with an intellectual fire I had never seen before. "It's a beautiful piece of work," he said, gesturing at a complex molecular model on the screen. The enzyme, designed to consume, to recycle, the ultimate expression of pragmatic biology. "What are you doing, Doctor?" "Balancing the ledger," he replied, his voice calm and terrible. "The authority used us as a biological variable in their equation. I'm about to introduce a new one into the conjoins." He held up a vial filled with a clear, viscous liquid. It looked like water, but I knew it was something far more dangerous. "They taught us that our lives have a price," Weiss said. "I am going to teach them the cost of theirs." I left him to his work. I went back to the barracks and found my sharpening stone. As I drew the knife across its surface, the sound no longer felt like a requiem. It was the sound of a promise. Through the metal plates of the nail's hull, I could feel the subsonic thrum of the conjoined. They were gathering outside. They could sense the change within the hive. They thought we were dying. They were wrong. We were being born. The attack came as a change in pressure. The infrasonic thrum that had been the background noise of our lives for 6 years deepened, coalescing into a focused, directional wave. It was not a call. It was a command. A single, unified order. Eradicate. Then they hit the perimeter. Not in packs, but as a tide. A wave of chitin and muscle that crashed against the outer walls of the nail. The automated pulse cannons fired until their barrels glowed, then went silent one by one as brute hosts tore them from their mountings. "They're through the wire," I said into the comms. I stood on a gantry overlooking the main hangar bay, the designated kill zone. My remaining soldiers, a hard core of maybe 15 men, were dug in behind barricades. "Funnel them in. Make every round count." There was no answer, only the grim clicks of safeties being released. The first of them stormed through the breached gate. They moved in perfect coordination, laying down sheets of corrosive enzyme while the hosts smashed through our defenses. The hangar became a storm of pulse fire, ricochets, and the wet, tearing sound of bodies being broken. In the midst of the chaos, a figure sprinted from a side corridor. It was Weiss. He was clad in a modified environmental suit, a large canister strapped to his back. He didn't look at me. He looked through me, his eyes fixed on a point beyond the battle. The main ventilation intake for their nest, he yelled over the din, pointing a finger toward the mountains. It's 2 clicks north. If I can reach it and disperse this. He slapped the canister. It will aerosolize the enzyme. It will turn their creche into a soup. It will balance the ledger. I didn't wish him luck. I didn't offer a word of encouragement. I watched him run, a single, brilliant, suicidal variable in a chaotic equation. He was an asset expending itself for a specific, high-value outcome. He disappeared into the swirling shadows and gunfire, a ghost on a mission of atonement. The line in the hangar buckled. A host shattered our main barricade, and the creatures poured through the gap. We were being overwhelmed. "We need more time," a voice said at my elbow. It was Stryker. He was holding a pulse rifle. The historian had finally run out of pages. "The west corridor," I said, pointing. "It's a natural choke point. Hold it for 2 minutes. It will bottleneck them." "Understood," Stryker said. He met my eyes, and in their depths I saw that his faith had not died, but had simply found a new, final object. "Command of Bait Group 7 is yours, Reaper," he said, his voice clear and formal. "By right of clarity." He turned and ran toward the corridor, 2 other soldiers following him. He fought like a man who had studied every book on last stands and was now putting theory into practice. He did not fight with my efficiency or Pike's feral grace. He fought with the rigid, desperate courage of a true believer. For a full 90 seconds, the sound of his rifle was a steady, rhythmic anchor in the chaos. Then, it stopped. Now there was only the press of bodies. Pike was at my side, a silent, fluid instrument of death. We moved as one, a 2-man vortex of violence. He didn't speak. He followed my lead without hesitation, ducking when I fired, lunging when I fell back. He was the perfect weapon. And then, he broke. A host, larger than any I had seen, ignored the rounds sparking off its chest and simply charged through the fire. It swatted me aside, the blow cracking my ribs and sending me skidding across the deck. Before I could recover, it was on him. Pike was fast, but he was not fast enough. The beast pinned him, and 2 more conjoined were on him in an instant. The perfect weapon was torn apart by a tide of claws and teeth. The line broke. For a single critical second, I was alone. A thought, ancient and weak, tried to surface, a ghost of loss. I crushed it. There was no time for the ghost, only for the math. I rose to my feet. The wave of attackers was thinning. Their movements were less coordinated. Some of the hosts were staggering, their riders twitching erratically. Weiss's ledger was being balanced. I fought. There was nothing else. I became a simple machine for processing violence. When my rifle ran dry, I used my knife. When the last conjoined fell, its rider shuddering and dying on its back, there was only silence. The nail was a ruin, a tomb filled with the bodies of my men and the enemy. I was the last moving thing. I stood in the wreckage, the air thick with the smell of blood and scorched metal. I looked at the dead. Stryker, a broken shape in a corridor. Weiss, a ghost in the mountains. Pike, a memory of torn flesh. I felt nothing that resembled grief. A craftsman does not mourn broken tools. He simply notes their loss and continues the work. The conjoined were not extinct. They were wounded, their future stolen. But they would recover. The war was not over. I retrieved my knife from the chest of a dead rider. The monomolecular edge was clean. I found my sharpening stone in the ruins of the barracks. I sat down amidst the slaughter, under the bruised twilight of my kingdom, and began the ritual. Weiss. He chose his own end. A failure of patience. Stryker. He found his faith at the last. A failure of vision. Pike. He broke. A failure of form. Each name slid into the void, a final piece of data. But the litany had changed. It was not a catalogue of weakness to be absorbed. It was a tally of the price paid to achieve this purity. This was not a litany of failure. It was the litany of the last harvest. A new twilight settled over Sector 9. My hell, my home. The hunt would continue. Forever. I was not the last one who believed he wasn't dead. I was the only one who was finally, truly alive.